Imagine paying thousands in HOA fees, and then, watching the board call the cops on your family business at sunrise. What would you do if a HOA tried to bulldoze your livelihood just 'cause it didn't match their vibe? Name's David Lawson. A few years back, I walked away from cufflinks and conference rooms and moved into my granddad's old vineyard in Cedar Ridge Valley. Dawn here smells like wet dirt, crushed grape skins, and possibility. On this one morning, though, it also smelled like trouble. You know that cold metal feeling you get when sirens cut through quiet? Yeah, that. I'm out there before the sun, pruning shears in hand, when a white SUV crawls up the lane like a cat hunting birds. Out steps the HOA president, Karen Hartwell, hair sprayed into a helmet, phone up, recording like she's Spielberg catching a blockbuster. Two officers crest the hill behind her, boots crunching through last season's leaves. Karen's smile says she thinks she owns the valley. She doesn't. "How's it going?" "Officers," I ask, steady as a metronome. Karen jumps in. "They sorry. He is operating an illegal commercial site in a residential community. This vineyard is a nuisance. Unsafe. Non-compliant." That was the first time I realized Karen wasn't just a stickler. She was a crusader with a grudge and a board behind her. Before the vines, I was a corporate attorney in San Francisco, billing a mind-numbing amount per hour. Then my marriage blew apart. I landed in Cedar Ridge with a beat-up pickup, a German shepherd named Barley, and a legacy. 40 acres of vines my granddad planted back in the early 1960s, when this valley was dirt roads, and folks who minded their own business. The farmhouse groaned like old bones. The irrigation lines were older than disco. But when dew pearls on grape leaves, at first light, it felt like salvation. I wasn't rich, but I was alive. Karen Hartwell ran Cedar Ridge Estates like a tiny country with a very loud national anthem. Her husband, Preston, built those beige copy-paste castles that sprouted up on what used to be pasture. Karen loved words like aesthetic and standards. She didn't love tractors, pickups, or the real-life mess of farm work. The spark, a fence. I replaced sagging wire along my boundary. Basic agricultural fencing. Tall enough to keep out deer and keep wedding guests from wandering into the road. Karen clacked over in her heels, clipboard in hand like a mall cop had joined the Secret Service. "That fencing violates our guidelines," she said. With respect, I told her, "This is agricultural land. Your HOA's brand new compared to this vineyard." She gave me that smile people wear when they're sure they're about to win. "We'll see about that." A few days later, a certified letter landed on my kitchen table like a dead fish. Cease and desist. Daily fines. Claims that my property was residential now. She'd copied the county, my bank, and the local paper. Most folks would panic, but I'd spent years in real estate law. I knew the terrain. Granddad's deed. It included agricultural rights, real, enforceable, forever-type rights that outlasted new subdivisions and their paint chip committees. I called Jake Porter, an old law school buddy who'd traded big firm life for environmental work. "David," he chuckled. "Someone just poked a sleeping bear." Barley thumped his tail like he agreed. I plowed through dusty file boxes. The house smelled like coffee and old paper. In a manila folder labeled, "Keep Forever," I found the language I needed: perpetual farming rights. I wrote a response, the way a surgeon wields a scalpel clean. Proceeds. A little scary. Copies to the county. The bank. The paper. If Karen wanted a public fight, fine. Let the public see. A county inspector Rodriguez came by. Anonymous tip, he said. Eyes tired, but kind. He walked the barn. The crush pad. The sheds. Everything checked out. Your exemption's rock solid. He told me, whoever's pushing this doesn't understand rural law. I did. And I understood people like Karen even better. Next came an emergency HOA board meeting about community beautification and property values. Translation: get rid of the vines that don't match the model homes. I showed up. The community center reeked of industrial cleaner and tension. Karen sat at the front table, flanked by bobblehead board members, nodding like dashboard dogs. She clicked through a slideshow about neighborhood character. Then she unveiled a petition concerned neighbors worried about traffic, noise, and farm smells. As if grapes were a biohazard. Here's where it got interesting. 3 old-timers stood up, folks who remembered the valley before stucco. David's family has been here longer than any of us, said Miss Patterson. A retired teacher with a spine of steel. Those vines are our history. For a second, Karen's mask cracked. Then she tabled the issue, chin high, like she hadn't just been politely smacked down. As people filed out, I spotted Karen whispering with a guy carrying a briefcase that screamed billable hours. When she noticed me noticing, the whispering stopped. Cute. When legal pressure didn't work, Karen turned to the modern battlefield social media. Concerned neighbors of Cedar Ridge popped up overnight. Photos of my tractor cropped to look like a rusty beast. Posts about delivery trucks, speeding, and flies. You know the tone, fake, polite, deeply malicious. It hurt. The hardware store clerk stopped chatting about weather. At the farmer's market, some folks stared through me like I was a ghost. The bank started asking odd questions about routine equipment financing. I could feel the temperature dropping around me. I dug into public records. Preston Karen's husband owned more land than most people realized. Several developments finished. More planned. And a quiet land buying spree. The math was ugly. Agricultural acres sell cheap. Rezone to residential, and the price jumps like a startled deer. My 40 acres were a gold mine if they could squeeze me out. Classic land grab. Jake said when I called. They use HOAs as cudgels. Works on folks who don't know their rights. I hired a surveyor and a title search. Best money I could have spent. Turns out, my property line ran a good ways into 3 HOA backyards. Granddad had granted construction easements, but never relinquished the dirt. Even better, a century-old utility easement cut straight through the development. Roads, power, water, lawful access, woven through the valley like threads in denim. Karen staged a safety town hall next. Printed petitions. Trembling voice. Talk of fire hazards and drunk drivers. But you could smell it, panic. Not policy. She was losing altitude. Then, a fat envelope arrived, a cease and desist from a swanky firm with a name designed to intimidate. It alleged violations of a dozen municipal codes and gave me 3 days to shut down or face a lawsuit for public nuisance. The letterhead was so fancy it might have had a mortgage. Here's the problem for them. I knew the playbook. Did I have piles of cash? Nah. But I had time. Grit. and a brain wired for land law. I drove to the courthouse and combed records till my eyes burned. In a dusty drawer misfiled where time forgets things, I found a bomb years back. The state designated this valley a historic agricultural district. Farms got teeth-sharp protections. Any new development within a couple miles needed environmental impact studies. Real ones. With oversight. Paper you can't fake without leaving tracks. I cross-checked Preston's projects. Guess how many studies he filed? 0. Every permit was a house of cards. Buyers thought they'd purchased dream homes. On paper, those dreams looked an awful lot like unpermitted construction. Jake's laugh came through the phone like thunder. Buddy, that's not a squabble. That's federal. Wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, maybe even racketeering. Words that make developers sweat. I called in a scientist, Dr. Nora Hale, a soil and water expert who's testified in more hearings than I've racked corks. She stepped into my kitchen. Barley sniffed her briefcase like it held bacon and started outlining groundwater. Erosion. Habitat corridors. What they did here, she said, tapping satellite photos, would take a decade to fix the right way. Next came Father Miguel Santos, a pastor and community organizer who'd been fighting quiet displacement across the valley. His congregants had stories, late-night knocks, low-ball offers, threats disguised as concerns. Miguel's eyes burned with the calm of a man who'd seen too much and was done being polite. We set up cameras, logged every call, saved every fake review. Karen's board paid contractors nobody could find in the phone book. HOA funds disappearing like socks in the dryer. Miguel rallied farm families. Jake filed for an injunction against further harassment. Dr. Hale started a report so tight you could bounce a quarter off it. The more we dug, the clearer the pattern. 4 other farming families had been pressured over the past few years. 2 had sold. The rest were hanging on by gritted teeth. We formed the Cedar Ridge Farmers Alliance and started meeting in my barn, passing thermoses and truth. Then the gloves came off. One dawn, I found an irrigation line, cut clean, surgical, not sloppy. A river of wasted water ran through my Pinot rows. Anonymous calls spooked my wedding clients with lies about chemical spills. 3 couples canceled in 1 week. Online, strangers swore my wine tasted like vinegar, and my events sent guests to the ER. Creative fiction. Industrial strength malice. Jake got a temporary restraining order, 18 pages, telling the HOA they couldn't harass agricultural operations. Did Karen stop? Nope. She got louder. Meanwhile, the numbers started telling their own story. Preston was leveraged up to his eyeballs. Construction loans, liens, deadlines. If he didn't nail down new permits soon, the bank would come knocking. Karen had skin in the game too. Rumors said she'd mortgage their house to fund his next phase. When the money men get nervous, the bullies get reckless. Dead fish showed up at my gate real subtle. Threat letters. Welfare checks called in to the cops. Just to clog my harvest days with flashing lights. But now every incident fed a federal file. Media sniffed the story. Farmers versus fraud. History versus haste. Folks started picking sides for real. Foggy Thursday. Preston's luxury sedan slides in. Door opens. And out steps a man who looks like sleep owes him rent. David, he says. Voice, honey sweet and panic bitter. Let's make this go away. He offered a mountain of cash for the land. Closing in 2 days. The subtext was louder than a siren. He needed my acres to plug the holes he drilled in his own ship. Preston, I told him, I wouldn't sell you this ground if you wrapped the offer in gold foil and sang a hymn. He leaned in. Mask slipping. You have no idea who you're up against. Thing is, I did. And, he had no clue who he was talking to. I'd been wearing a wire for weeks. Per the advice of Agent Ruiz, who'd first shown up looking like a county guy and turned out to be very, very federal. Every threat, every hint, every oh-so-casual bribe recorded. Karen's feed went off the rails. She started posting 20 times a day lies about taxes, health scares, conspiracy babble. Her followers slid off like frosting on a hot car. In public, she snapped at neighbors. At council meetings, the mayor had to gavel her down. You could feel it, the empire wobbling. Jake arranged mediation at town hall. Neutral ground, he said. Opportunity for peace. What Karen and Preston didn't know, the state attorney general's office planned to sit in. Media had cameras rolling, and our exhibits were loaded like a freight train. I barely slept the night before. Walked the rows with barley. Touched posts Granddad sunk with his own hands. The moon made the wires glow like lines on a map leading home. Town hall packed. Standing room. Whisper heat. Karen sat front and center, wearing power red and a smile with too many teeth. Preston arrived with a pair of lawyers whose cufflinks could pay off a student loan. The mediator called us to order. Karen went first, greatest hits about neighborhood character and one selfish commercial operator. Preston followed with a generous offer to buy me out for the good of all. My turn. I thanked the room nice and slow, then opened a folder thick as a brick. I walked folks through the Valley's original land grant. The heritage designation from the late 1980s. The survey that put HOA patios on my dirt. The non-existent environmental studies. The money flows. The shell contractors. The intimidation. The cuts. The calls. The threats. People murmured. Some gasped. A camera flash popped. And one more thing, I said, looking toward the doors. There are law enforcement officers in the building tonight. If they could please step forward. Badges flashed. Agent Ruiz and 2 marshals walked the aisle, like Sunday was about to get interesting. Karen's voice broke into a scream. This is a setup, he's lying. Preston went white. His lawyers started muttering about rights. The cuffs clicked anyway. That sound, it carries. Months later, in federal court, Preston learned the justice system does. In fact, keep receipts. The judge called his scheme a calculated exploitation of families who feed this valley. Karen got her own consequences. Lighter time. Heavier fall. The white SUV disappeared. So did the throne. Cedar Ridge got official. Ironclad protections. No more beige creep. The HOA dissolved under the weight of its lawsuits and its shame. Folks realized their board hadn't been protecting values. It had been protecting a hustle. The condemned subdivisions became green again, wildlife corridors. Restored creek beds. Picnic tables where model homes used to stand. Watching those bulldozers undo shortcuts felt like therapy. Business boomed. Reporters told the story. Couples booked weddings years out. Our label Justice Ridge found shelves and stayed there. I'll be real. Victory doesn't fix everything. But it sure helps your sleep. Dr. Nora and I kept working first on soil samples, then on dinners, then on what comes after. She moved into the farmhouse with a microscope and a laugh that makes mornings warmer. Barley got a rescue buddy named Justice, who thinks birds are suspicious and squirrels are war criminals. The Farmers Alliance became a movement. We share resources, swap strategies, and hold each other up when the mail brings bad news. Father Miguel's sermons about tending the earth draw crowds from 3 counties. Ethel from the courthouse, our quiet hero, started writing a book. She calls it Cabinets and Conscience. I told her I'd buy the first copy and make the second a gift. Calls started coming in from other states, different valleys. Same playbook. Developers using HOAs as crowbars. Anonymous tips. Sudden finds. Standards weaponized against families who've worked the ground since before smartphones and gated entries were a thing. We started sharing documents, contacts, checklists, truth scales. Turns out Preston wasn't a lone wolf. He was a cog. And the folks who think farmers won't fight, they don't know us very well. Some evenings, I walk the rows until the sky turns the color of old copper. The air's got that sweet green tang you only get when vines are waking up for harvest. Barley and Justice range ahead, tails up, ears tuned to secrets. Dr. Nora flags a soil core and grins at me like we're co-conspirators, which I guess we are. I think about Granddad driving stakes into stubborn ground. About neighbors who stood up when it counted. About a clerk who remembered what a law meant, not just where it was filed. About a pastor who turned grief into motion. About a valley that said not here and meant it. Look, if your HOA's trying to turn your home into their hobby, breathe. Document everything. Learn your deed. Ask old-timers what the land remembers. And don't let anybody tell you the rules are only for you. What would you do if the board came for your livelihood? Anyone else had a HOA? Try this mess on you. Drop your story below. Your comment might be the lifeline someone needs tonight. Oh, and if you're one of the good neighbors, the ones who bring casseroles instead of complaints, stick around. We're building something here. Not just vines and fences. A community that knows the difference between standards and control. Between aesthetic and alive. Because when decent people fight back with facts, law, and a little stubborn love, bullies lose. And the victory, well, it tastes like a good harvest and a long exhale.